Oh, it's so good to see you.
Hi, Liv. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me.
I I feel like now it's like it's been Zahmet and Izzyet already because of the technical issues, but
The technical issues always happen. I have all these things sticking out of my computer, like lights and this loudspeaker, and I think it was too much for my old computer.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about your chair.
Yeah. So, okay, I made a point of sitting on this chair, which you left behind when you left Istanbul.
Oh my God, I forgot about that
2000.
chair.
When did you leave? 13 or 14?
13 or 14. 13, yeah. Oh my God, it's been almost 10 years.
It has been 10 years. So yeah, this conversation, we weren't supposed to prepare for it.
Right.
And we didn't prepare for it. So, but it had a kind of I mean, I spent the last few hours thinking of what we could talk about, and we could talk about so many things, but it had a kind of archaeological effect on me, where I went back in time and thought about the last 10 years of my life, and came up with that chair, this one.
They were the fastest of any of the years, yeah.
They were, yes, so much happened, right?
Yeah, so much happened. Yeah, yeah.
And you wrote another book.
I wrote another book and I've spent the morning looking at at the video of the coral. I loved it. And the marbled paper. You're doing such cool stuff. It made me, on the one hand, I was happy that we're doing this. And on the other hand, I was like, why don't I just like regularly check what Sibel is doing? But I will now.
Well, the New Yorker sends me emails, and I saw your last piece in it. So I regularly do read your pieces, but then, yeah, so I read that one and I got really excited about your book.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, thank you for checking my pieces. It's weird. I feel like the distance between us could be overcome with, digital works like that piece on corals, and the marbling, which is also, it involves some video. And the space of Zoom, I think is really, I mean, it has been the coolest thing about the pandemic to
totally
actually take it seriously. It's more serious than Skype somehow, which we used to have.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually installed Zoom a few months before the pandemic, unlike a lot of other people, because I was supposed to go to France for a residency and in Cassis to Camargo Foundation. And they used Zoom. Like, we communicated through Zoom before the pandemic. So, I adapted really quickly to this lockdown.
I had N95 masks.
You did?
Well, you probably had them too. You probably used them for work sometimes.
I had them, but I had the kind with the vents.
The vent, yeah. I had that too, but I had a raccoon broke into my apartment and when I was living in Brooklyn, and it like I was just working and like this, and then and then Friday, you remember Friday, came in and was like meowing, and then I thought he wanted to eat, and so I went in the room and I gave him his food and he wouldn't eat it, and then I looked in his bed and there was it looked like a pile of laundry. And then I saw there's like a big old tail hanging off of it and it has stripes. And then it looks up at me and it's like that. And it was like a raccoon. And then we ended up calling the government. So you could have just opened the window and the raccoon would go out. But instead we closed the window and called the government, and they sent a big cage with sardines in it. It became like for the raccoon was there for weeks because we couldn't open the window because then more raccoons would come in supposedly. And like there was this very strict protocol that they had that I think was not designed for like apartments. But so basically I had to move out and the raccoon was there. And then eventually the raccoon learned how to open the window and let itself out and left. And then I had to get a man to like take away the cage with which was full of sardines. It was this huge cage. It was, yeah. And he was like, you'll know when the raccoon is in it because it's gonna like make a lot of noise. I was like, oh my God. But like, but then the raccoon had been like living in my apartment all that time, and it had like pooped in the closet and rubbed its poop on the ceiling. And then I was like reading about it, and like the raccoon latrines have some kind of, there's like a very low chance that it has this like egg in it. And if it has that egg, then you're 100% gonna die. It's like it has a neurotoxin where you go blind and then you like lose your mind and you die a horrible death. So I had this mask on and I was like trying to clean it off, and then I realized that I couldn't. So I called professional cleaners.
But it sounds
I
like the
heard
kind
that
of thing that could happen to you and only you. Apparently it does happen to people, huh?
I mean, I don't know. The guy who lived in the building superintendent was like, I've never heard of this. I've lived in Bed-Stuy for 40 years. I've never heard of anyone having a raccoon. The guy who came didn't really seem to expect it. But I mean, it was kind of my fault because if I had left the screen down, then the raccoon couldn't have come in. But I had the
Okay,
screen up
because you
because
couldn't think that this was a possibility. Yeah, it was your fault.
yeah, I didn't because I thought, well, I used to keep the screen out because there was a fire escape there and it was like a yard with a fence. So I wasn't afraid of burglars. And Friday used to like to go out and sit on the fire escape. But it didn't occur to me that someone else would come in.
It's terrible, but at the same time, it's very, very cute. You know, the
It
raccoon
was
with the big
kind of
eyes.
cute. Yeah, I wish
Small
that
hands
I'd
that
taken
can do
pictures and
things.
seen it more. Yeah, yeah, I know. But I was also scared of it then because they were like, oh, it might have rabies. And like, it didn't have rabies though. If it had rabies, then it would have been out in the daytime, apparently.
Geçmiş olsun.
Çok teşekkür ederim. So we were both on the cutting edge with the Zoom and the masks.
Yes, oh, that's how we, yes. So the Gezi trial, it keeps recurring. There have been 3 trials. The government wants to turn it into a criminal activity. And the first 2 trials, people were acquitted. And on the third one, the last one, you know, they keep opening the same trial with the same evidence. It's like a Kafka novel. And yeah, this last time they were found guilty and went.
Ooh, like the organizers? The first? No.
I mean, there's no organizer really. So
I mean,
a bunch of people they
just random people
pulled out, just random people they pulled out who had been there. So it could have been anyone really. And one person, he's actually a friend and a neighbor, Osman Kavala. He was sentenced to like lifelong imprisonment. I mean, he's gonna come out.
I saw about that, yeah.
If he's gonna come out at one point, the European Court of Justice decided that it was a violation and asked for the immediate release, his immediate release, like more than 2 years ago, and they kept him for 4.5 years without what do you call it?
Yeah, not the accusation, charge, without
a charge, yeah. And he got acquitted in the meantime, and then they made up this other thing, and he got acquitted from that. But anyway, it keeps recurring. Yeah. And yeah, it's been such a huge part of my life for the past, I guess, 4.5 years. And it's changing this experience of Gezi also. it's affecting that experience. But yeah,
That's really interesting. How so? Like it makes it look like when you remember it, it feels different.
Yeah, so the idea is to change that experience and make it into a criminal activity. And also like bring in fear, which really wasn't there at the time. Like, I don't know if you were afraid when people were coming to your apartment with gas masks, but I don't remember fear.
It wasn't fear, no. My mother was afraid. My mom was calling me on the phone and she was like, it's gonna be like Adnan, they're gonna hang people and like, yeah, unmentiras.
Yeah, I mean, it's Osman actually said that if they had a rope, they would hang me.
Yeah, my mom was really upset about Osman Kavala.
Yeah, I'm really upset.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully he'll come out. Like if the elections produce different results. I mean, it's a very political trial, and it's really obvious that it's really obvious why it's happening. It's to silence, so it's to produce fear and to silence people into silence, to scare people into
submission.
Silence.
Yeah.
But maybe it had the opposite effect. So I don't know what's going on right now. I've been home for the past 10 days dealing with COVID. But people are really angry at the verdict. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
It's funny because we were already so into archaeology, especially you were so into archaeology, but like we had those archaeology kind of adventures together too, even 10 years ago. And then it's almost like there's just more and more stuff to excavate. I mean, I guess it's always like that, but it kind of feels like the past 10 years have been like particularly excavating times. I don't know, in the US politically, it's been like looking back at the 90s and telling stories differently about stuff that happened then. And I think to some extent in Turkey too, it's about, I mean, in kind of a sinister way, about reframing. I mean, like you just said, reframing Gezi as something else, and earlier periods too.
Yeah, I guess archaeology is, I guess archaeology is always part of the present. I mean, I'm realizing it more and more.
Yeah. And politics, it's always a huge part of politics, which I didn't totally realize. Like with Putin now, it's actually like Russian novels are really relevant again. Like it's weird.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that actually, about how politics, I mean, politicians, especially the really fascist ones, or the ones who become more and more fascist, are actually really interested in controlling words and controlling the power to name things differently, which is a literary act.
It's literary. It's totally literary. I'm smart. So I had this experience in 2019. I was supposed to go to Russia for like sort of a cultural exchange. Like they bring American people who are like, I don't know. I don't know what the program was, but anyway, I was supposed to go to Russia and talk about like my books about Russian literature and education and cultural exchange and meet with journalists and stuff like that. So then they expanded this program to Ukraine. They were like, why don't you just go to Ukraine first? And I was like, sure, I've never been to Ukraine. And then I went there and I was like, I just wasn't prepared for, and so like, I was not prepared for the extent to which everyone was like deeply angry at Dostoevsky in particular, but they were also mad at Pushkin and they were also mad at Tolstoy. Not just like, oh, we're annoyed at Russia, but like they were like, it's the same rhetoric when you look at the novels of Dostoevsky. It's the same exact rhetoric that you see in the fake news that's justifying the occupation of the Crimea. And at first, like, I had this resistance to it. I was like, oh, you know, these poor people have been traumatized by war. They've lost the ability to like appreciate great universal literature. They can now only see these like sad provincial, like, I don't know what I was thinking. And then like, because for me, the past 10 years were like, a lot of my thinking, my big thinking was like a lot about gender actually, because like I'm a lesbian now, and which like I wasn't.
Yeah, you weren't a lesbian when you were.
I wasn't a lesbian. Well, yeah, so like, and it really, it made me read books really differently. And so, you know, I went back and I was thinking about like how was I kind of depoliticized, and what kind of like heteronormativity did I internalize from these books that I loved so much? But I wasn't really thinking about, anyway, then I reread this book, this Edward Said book, Culture and Imperialism, where he's talking about the role of the novels, the British and French novels, that the novel became this dominant form in Western Europe at the same time that they were these big empires that were running on slavery and exploitation and colonialization. And that all of the novelists, and not just the novelists, like the actual liberal, like John Stuart Mill and all these, like the architects of like liberal humanism and earlier in the Enlightenment, the people who came up with the rights of man, those were imperialist slaveholding people too. So like, and that those ideas are actually like baked in. And he doesn't talk about the Russian novel, but it's also, I mean, the three European novel traditions in order of importance as received by like the comparative literature institution now is like Britain, France, and Russia. And in Russia, it happened during this imperial period. And I realized that I had kind of a block to seeing that partly from growing up in America, where there was this like story of like, oh, literature it's not political and it transcends borders, and it's what brings, because of the Cold War, like it brings us together and we can all appreciate the works of Tolstoy because they're human and they're not about these like provincial things. But I think I also got it from like some aspect of, I always thought that like having some not completely American identity, like having some Turkishness in there was somehow like protecting me from some sort of American chauvinism. But I realized that there are actually ways that like the particular kind of Turkish nationalism that is in my mother's side of the family, especially, it's the exact same thing. It's like, let's all join the great universal flow of literature. Why do people want to, you know, like, why don't they understand that they're just the same as us? And that the rhetoric about the Kurdish people in Turkey is kind of similar to the rhetoric about the Ukrainian people in Russia. And it's there in the novels, you know, and I wasn't really seeing it in this rhetoric about universalism, about being universal and progress and science. It's really about a certain group of people more than another group of people, and thinking that those things inhere in a certain group of people and not another group of people. And I didn't realize that until like 2 weeks ago. So now I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's about identity, I suppose. I mean, I'm not an expert on Russian literature, but yeah, like when you look at it from that perspective, I understand how it could be part of racism.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how you use the term universal and human nature so freely. But yeah, I guess thinking about gender really helps us see how you know, all of these identities are built through all of these different literary acts. So art is part of it, literature is part of it, even though it's not necessarily, I guess, part of popular culture. It exists within a framework. You know,
it's also it's also just like the imperial, like, I don't know, Erdogan uses the Ottoman past, and in the same way Putin uses the Russian imperial past, but the Russian imperial past really is cemented in those novels. Like that's what it is.
Hmm. Wow.
I guess I still want to, I don't know. I guess I'm always thinking now about this, like, yeah, so what do you think about the universal and like human nature? Do you think that it's just like it's something that doesn't exist or that can't be accessed or doesn't make sense to talk about?
Um, I have really, I never tried to talk about human nature. Or like sometimes I get these questions in interviews,
Mhm.
like how should ecological art be, or something like that. Like how should, and I never,
Yeah.
and I never answer those. I say, well, I can only talk
Mhm.
about my experience,
Yeah.
and of course, it will be from the filter of my experience. I'm, not trying to do something subjective or universal. Um, but the question there's a question I wanted to ask you, and it's related to this. Your first book, uh, it was your own experience, and then you started writing novels. And when I read your novels, I also, try to. I also see them as. I know I also imagine you going through these experiences, and not everything has to be true, but the experience, I guess the feelings must be
Mhm.
through your personal experience. So um, how did you, and you really insist on like writing novels now, even though
Mhm.
the main character kind of sounds like you. So like how do you, and this person has a specific identity that uh, you know resembles yours. So like why did you want to make that transition? And like I yeah.
I guess like I mean I always wanted to write novels because I like reading novels. It's true that the books are really close to my experience and this is a question I get in interviews a lot, like your character is the daughter of Turkish immigrants, so it's you, right? And like just like yeah, but it's really based on my experience. It's based on what I know. But for me, the point wasn't to like memorialize my experience because like I think it's important or whatever. Like the reason that I wanted to do this book now was to go back in time and like you get to a certain age and you're like, I don't know, this has been what the last 10 years were about for me, was a lot of revisiting earlier times and thinking like seeing mistakes, seeing how I described historical events in a way that now seems inaccurate and biased um and punitive to people like me, like I wasn't I wasn't looking at things in a sympathetic. I don't agree with my worldview, and I think I was hurting myself and causing myself a lot of unnecessary, avoidable problems. But and then I think there's a temptation in general when you get older to look back at yourself and be like, I was so stupid. I made all of these mistakes, but like I actually wasn't any stupider then than I am now. Like I'm the same stupid person now. I just have better information. So I wanted to like reconstruct why I thought those things were good ideas at the time, why I didn't take what now looks to me as good advice. Why didn't it look like good advice then? And the and the kind of project for it for me is always thinking, why are things the way they are and why are they not different? And for me, the part of that I'm looking at now is like what in me enabled me to keep them the way that they are, like what made the status quo work on me, because I was acting in a way that I thought was very free. I thought I was choosing what I was like really interested in, and when I look back, it doesn't seem free at all. It seems like I was serving interests that were not my own, that were other people's interests. And I want to see how that happens and
Like the Russian
help
Imperial
people.
Project.
Yeah, like the Russian Imperial Project, or like, like we're talking a lot now about consent, like what were the terrible non-consensual things that happened. But if I look at my life, like, I mean, I guess this is a sign of being privileged, but the worst things that happened to me were completely consensual. I was like, sure, let's do that. And it was terrible, so like, and I think that that's really true in society, is like people consent to work in terrible jobs. They like consent to all kinds of atomization. Like, why do we agree to these? Why does it seem like a good idea? Why does it seem like, in a way, it's because we don't have better choices, but in other ways, there's also like ideology, and literature is a part of it that makes certain things seem attractive or seem cool. And yeah, when they're actually prisons.
Mm.
And then like I don't have, then it's like, so why does it have to be? I was thinking like, so for some people, it seems like, I don't know, I was talking to Celine Sciamma about like her movie, like Petite Maman, where it was sort of autobiographical, but she was like, for me, it's a magic trick where I have to leave out, I can't have too much of my story in, because I want the reader to be able to project and to be able to enter into it. And I get it, and it works with me with her movie. But sometimes when there's really like spare like allegorical stuff where there isn't a lot of like details about the person and where they come from, like I can't get into it. Like I almost feel like it's appealing to some idea of a universal person that like won't work on me. But like if they put all the specific things about them in the book, I can like imagine, or in whatever work of art it is, I can kind of like imagine like, okay, I would feel like this and I would feel like that. I would feel like that. So to me, it's actually a way of making it like more open to other people, is to have more personal details in it. Also because like my experience of life is that like going through life, like it's not like a negligible part of it, that your head is full of all this stuff. Like it's full of like all this identity and languages and layers, and like to think that you could sort of like set that aside and get to something else sort of doesn't seem practical to me. Yeah, I don't think I could do it.
So in a way, it does translate your experience in a way that is more open to in a way that's more open to you being creative about the things that you can write about, and also to let the viewer, not the viewer, to let
reader,
the reader
yeah,
identify.
It's really
the
about that. It's to
of
get the reader. Yeah, it's to get the reader to like ask those questions about their own life. So like in the new book, Celine is really like, she's just questioning everything. She's like, why is it cool to go to parties? Why does everyone have to be drunk? Why is a party intolerable if you're not drunk? Like, why does everyone have to have a boyfriend? Why is this what sex is? Why isn't sex some other thing? And it's like she's asking all these questions that like I don't ask anymore. And it's like, but she's coming from a particular place where she has, you have to have a certain amount of information to like ask those questions from, even. So like that's what the project was for me.
So yeah, so it lets you reconsider, to like process all those questions yourself. Awesome.
And so but for you, it's very much more the history of like places, and it's not really you, like your personal life is not in your work so much. Or is it?
It's a way of projecting. So what I do is I look at the world and then some things keep coming up, some things start resonating with each other, like objects and places. And then I do some research. I do a lot more research than I actually use and show at the end. But the more things mingle with each other and start working with each other, they turn into pieces. But it's not usually, I mean, it was a problem. It was a problem for me to talk about like me, my experience, like but it's always about how things go through this filter, and then they somehow come together. And sometimes I pull myself out of words. So I give objects the credit, and take artistic credit out of works and say that like the art makes itself, kind of. But at the end of the day, it's my subjective experience, and I try to give a little glimpse of how that process, kind of hint at that process, and to open doors for the viewers to do something similar for themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I was thinking about that with that. There's almost like a ghost, like when your Zoom wasn't working at the beginning of this conversation, I just felt like there was something really like characteristic about you sort of like appearing and then disappearing. And I like when I was watching the video of all of the choral and that, like it felt the choral in that room in the seminary in Heybeliada, it felt like because having visited you in Heybeliada, and like it really felt like a synthesis of like your time there, because you were always interested in those old, like the discontinued monasteries that, you know, still have some activity, but it's like a trace of a trace of a trace of what's going on, and how closely that was tied with the nature. And the thing that was bringing those things together was you. Like it's like the choral was not going to be in that room, and that you had created this really like caring, loving, but also like spooky way of like this ICU for choral, where it was like it felt like you could hear it breathing, but you weren't there, and there was something about like your absence, but the whole thing was so full of your presence it felt really evocative too. And it made me think about like the signs of people, because like none of the people are there, like the people who destroyed the choral and the people who built the seminary, like everyone's kind of gone, but you can like see some system working and think about the system of people. That felt really exciting to me.
Thank you.
How did you actually?
It's ghost-like the way you describe it.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, the seminary is a ghost-like environment. It's a huge place, but it's empty because the government shut it down in the 70s. And the choral is there because
was it hard to get in? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Into the
was it hard
seminary?
to get permission to into the seminary?
Not at all, actually. We tried to have this exhibition in the museum, in the Adalar Müzesi. And that was harder than the seminary. So we just switched to the seminary. There, the new, well, he's now in İmroz, Gökçeada now, but the head of the school was a very open-minded environmentalist.
Cool.
Metropole, I think he was Metropole, religious person, and the organizer knew the librarian who worked there, and the head of the school was really excited about having this exhibition there. So they were very welcoming. Cool. But the choral was migrant choral. It's they were on a reef near Yassıada, where actually Adnan Menderes, the trial of Adnan Menderes took place. And they were living there peacefully, you know, they lived there through the trial, and they lived there when, you know, a lot of things were happening in the world. And until Erdogan decided to take over the island and build this gigantic hotel. So this was after the Menderes trials. The military left, and they gave the island to Istanbul Su Ürünleri Fakültesi, which is the marine biology department of Istanbul University. And then they deserted the island, and for a while it was used as a fish farm, and the coral survived through all of that. And it was deserted for a long time. Actually, it was okay. This is interesting. It was the first. It was used as a monastery back in the Byzantine times, and then a British ambassador, Bulwer, bought the island and built this castle, like Scottish castle on the island, and he had parties. This was like 80 something. And then he left, he sold the island, and anyway, so then all these things happened to it, and the coral was there. But Erdogan built a huge hotel on the island. He I don't understand like why he was really interested in these deserted spaces and building something there. But the hotel actually doesn't fit on the island. So it's like part of it is protruding out. So they made a support
Oh,
column,
wow.
like
Yeah.
that goes all the way down to the sea because the hotel didn't fit. And
The hotel's existence is like independent of the earth. If the earth isn't there, you just have to like build something to hold it up.
yeah, and yeah, all these pillars are holding it up. And there was also some filling of the shore. So the coral started dying. And that's when I learned about the coral, was because it was dying. And it felt really moving. It made me really angry that this was happening out of sight, away from sight, and people couldn't react to this. The whole thing, like the islands are also, unless you have your own boat, you can't get to those islands. There are two, and also it was underwater, so they were dying. And corals also are ecosystem creatures, so they are part of an ecosystem, and they create space for an ecosystem to exist. And when the corals die, the whole reef dies. So I just wanted to make that visible and, have a kind of experience where we are more aware of what's going on. So I had this contraption where I could, where the coral could live in the monastery for a short period of time. And I had a contraption to, and I learned from a scientist that I need to cool them down. I need to keep them at a stable temperature of 15
Did you build
degrees.
that whole thing yourself? Because it's a very elaborate apparatus.
So I built a really elaborate apparatus to keep them cold. I actually put a hole, I built it myself.
Wow.
Put a hole through a freezer, 2 holes through a freezer, and I had 100-meter long, 100-meter long holes inside the freezer. And like I had a motor that turned the water, so it
like
went
a heart.
to the coral.
It looks like a heartbeat. Yeah.
And and that was a surprise. I had this contraption to distribute the water between the corals, and the corals were in jars, in plastic bottles. That so okay, there's a group of divers who wanted to rescue the corals, so they were transplanting them to another island that was too small to build on, and this transplant really moved me, like that they had to be they were put in plastic bottles and being transplanted. It was just so absurd, because corals are actually animals that are attached to rocks, and the conditions that forced them into moving into exile were it actually is what compelled me to do all that pipe work. But so I had this contraption to keep it cold, and I tried it actually, and it was working. The water temperature was 15 degrees when I tried it in my house. But in the exhibition, something happened. The temperature kept rising, and I couldn't bring it down. And so every day I was going to the seminary, which is on top of Heybeli Island. So I had to like really hike there every day,
yeah,
like a monk. And like a true tesisatçı, my contraption wasn't working. So like I had to go every day and, check the temperature and add some more holes into the freezer. And I added a fan so there's one thing that I hadn't considered, which is how a freezer works. It works by externalizing the heat. So that resistance thing, that like the thing that's behind in the back of fridges. So they actually warm up the room and to keep themselves the interior cool. And in the seminary, unlike my unlike my like I had tried this outside. The room, there was no way to externalize the heat. So the freezer was getting cold, but the room itself was getting warmer and warmer. And the solution was to put in an AC, but we couldn't put an AC into a historic building. So suddenly, like one day, all the corals died. So
Wow.
and then to me this and the breathing sound was the contraption I made magically, or the contraption I made to distribute the water between the corals was making the sound, which sounded like an inhaler, a ventilator,
Or like a ventilator, exactly.
Emergency room. And it was the same sound that comes out of the mouthpiece of that the divers use. We call it ahtapot.
Oh, yeah.
We call it an octopus. I don't know what the English is. And so this was the same sound. So it felt like the corals were trying to breathe above water. And then they died. And I could have failed, and I could have like closed the exhibition. But instead, I decided to make a point of it, and I saw my own mistake, and it was the mistake of like trusting my control of the technology so much that I didn't consider the possibility that the coral could die. I mean, if I had, I wouldn't put them in a room and make an exhibition. That was like I didn't. I guess I took the responsibility, but I trusted myself so much. And in a way, this was like a year before the pandemic. So it was really strange to live through the same sensation, the sentiments again during the pandemic, because the scientists were working really hard and they were trying to make a vaccine. They were trying to, the doctors were trying really hard without sleeping, like me
running to the monastery.
The monastery every day to keep people alive. And it was just, and it happened eventually, but it was just not fast enough. And then I realized, okay, this is how climate change will feel like, or it already feels like there's no way to externalize the heat. And
exactly.
temperatures rising so fast that things are happening, and of course they will happen in chain reactions. Now it's easier to see, and like how that will feel. And so that gave me, so we already had footage from the exhibition, and that experience was what compelled me to actually turn it into a video. And you can see.
So you turned it into a video after the pandemic?
So
it's like both. It's like totally. Oh, that's so interesting. Because of course you're totally thinking that, because those people were alone, like they were like alone with their respirators, and it was really, you can't see that post after having seen that and not think of it, your video. Yeah, so the coral was all isolated. They were standing on desks that the children used, when they were in the seminary in the school. And they were isolated as individuals. And coral,
you can't talk about an individual when you're talking about a coral, because it's an animal that sort of replicates with polyps that, so like if you have a coral population, they are like clones of like a small polyp. They also reproduce sexually, but anyway, it's complicated, but they're not individuals. They're like a colony is also genetically connected. So all of that was in a way conflicting or making this idea of the individual absurd. And the absurdity connected with the plastic bottles, the plastic jars in which these things were confined. So in a way, that's like identity, you know, the identity of an author, and how to isolate that from her surroundings. And yeah.
It's also reminding me of the imperialism and the gender stuff too, because I don't know, like you had such an idealistic thing, a project, which was to keep these coral alive. But then the way that the tools that we have like are, it's kind of like the novel. So like the tools that we have are, they're based on this idea of like, it's all hierarchy, right? It's like, you know, racial hierarchy and gender hierarchy, and a hierarchy with people at the top and nature at the bottom. And like, you know, certain races and women are closer to nature, and other races and men are like, you know, closer to pure spirit or whatever. And colonialism is like, oh, I can like extract, like if you look at what people say about like what John Stuart Mill says about, he's like, it doesn't make sense to view the West Indies as a country. It's not a country. It's a place where England finds it convenient to do her business and to like grow her stuff. So it's like, it's all about externalizing and shoving stuff out and controlling nature, which people had to do to survive. Like in order to be able to like do any kind of art or novels or anything at all, you have to like keep nature at bay, because it was like just to stay alive that long. But it's all based on this premise that you can like exclude all of the kind of material stuff that you don't want. And that's all the environmental problems, is like, we've just shoved off all the stuff to other places. And, you know, to create this little place where we have no garbage and where the air is perfect, we've like turned the world into like a garbage heap. And it's the same thing with like the way a refrigerator or a freezer or an air conditioner works, is like, you think that it's making the place cold, but of course it's just redistributing. It's just moving the heat somewhere else. And the question is like, is it going to be in your house, or is it going to be, which is something I'm extremely conscious of now, because our refrigerator is broken to the extent that it produces so much heat. It's like the hottest thing. Inside it's okay, but like outside, and Friday died in the pandemic, unfortunately, unrelatedly, he got cancer. But so now we have these two rescue cats. Yeah. And
What did Manjuk?
Yeah.
You don't have your cats die on you during the pandemic.
Well, so now we have these two
okay.
Yeah, we have these two rescue cats, and they sit on the refrigerator and they just hang out there because it's the warmest place in the apartment.
You should just keep that fridge and get another one. You should just keep it for the cats.
Keep it for the cats and get another one to actually like keep your food cold. Yeah.
Yeah, it made me feel.
But that's so like, but like there's a way of thinking, like there's a way of thinking about all this stuff, like I don't know, like the universal rights of like all of the theories and all of the philosophies that are about human nature and human rights and human liberties and respecting people and equality, like they were all produced by these kind of like slave owning people. And like, you know, there's this thing that they say, like, you can't take down the master's house. You can't use the Audre Lorde. You can't use the master's tools to take down the master's house, but you don't have, those are the tools. That's what tools are. Like, I don't know. I don't really see it that way. Cause like, so, oh, like maybe you can't use that rhetoric that these slaveholding people came up with to dismantle the rhetoric of slaveholding people, except that like nobody had the leisure to like come up with these theories and to come up with art and philosophy and literature and science, except through accumulating wealth, which they did in this like a horrible way by like externalizing all of their problems somewhere else and extracting and taking everything that was good and hoarding it. But like maybe we can eventually turn that, you know, maybe we can use it to like reintegrate.
Okay, I want to say so much, but I have to think linearly to be able to do that, which is hard for me. But I mean, first of all, when you the Imperial project, I just noticed how it was really about stashing things away, but stashing death away. So when you talked about controlling nature, I actually had this adventure in a Baroque town called Ludwigsburg in the south of Germany, where I was invited to do an exhibition, and I really like to connect with space. So I was Googling Ludwigsburg, and I just and it was just like really interestingly, it's a tiny little city that you know, the surrounding is mostly agricultural, but then inside the city, like I was shocked when I went there. On the plane, I could see like farm after farm after farm, like planted plantations. And then when I went down, there were these massive Baroque palaces, just like one after the other. There was, you know, so many. So it turned out that the Duke of Stuttgart wanted to get out of Stuttgart because, you know, I don't know, maybe there was a pandemic or something. He didn't want to mingle in a middle-aged city with all these people. So he just wanted to like extract himself into a more pleasurable area and built this Ludwigsburg, his city. And he selected people, so a person of each trade and his favorite people to just like go out there and live. And so one thing I did was, you know, as I entertained myself with the story, was I took the plan of the Baroque garden plan of the first palace that this chain of you know, dukes built, and I turned that into I looked at the garden plan. So for me, a Baroque garden is very much about controlling nature, but as a way to sort of defy death, you know, to show that you're above death, you can control this chaos. It gives you a sense of control, and I put those geometric sculptures in the geometric forms of the garden, and I used them in I crocheted hair in these geometric patterns, so they are in ways similar to the garden plan. So, you know, hair, of course, is part of our body that is already dead, and then so yeah, like I kept thinking a lot about like deferring death, or like not seeing, and then putting your garbage in another continent, and everything like that is also about, in a way, deferring death. So I started looking at compost and like how to live with death and how to like thrive within death.
Wow, that's mind-blowing.
So and it's not, and and then I realized that Donna Haraway had done the same thing, and she wrote about it. She wrote an entire book about this. It starts with compost, and it's called Staying with the Trouble. It's kind of like a post-colonial critique as at the same time. So yeah. So yeah, so I'm making some sculptures now with trash. Another thing that you can sympathize with, that the beaches around the islands that we, you know, went to together. I kept seeing all the styrofoam. The styrofoam travels furthest in the sea, and I kept seeing it. And at one point, they started becoming. I mean, it's gross. You know, it's really disgusting to see among the pebbles all the styrofoam waste. But as I started collecting it, and at some point, it became beautiful. I don't remember now when it started becoming beautiful, but it actually did. And yeah, now I make these sculptures with the styrofoam.
That's so cool. I had sort of an experience. So I spent last month, I went to an art residency, Art Omai in upstate, and my bathroom had ants in it. And at first I was thinking about like having to, because the whole place was kind of infested with ants, and I didn't know what the ants were only in the bathroom sink, and they would kind of like come out, and I wasn't sure why. And I cleaned the sink. I thought maybe there's like food particles in the sink, and it wasn't. And sometimes they would be there and sometimes they wouldn't. But like I could see there was like a really specific moment where they changed from, it was because they reminded me of these cats, of these two rescue cats who were very different, because I always only had one cat before. And when you have two cats, it's very different. It's like a population already. And they move differently, and they feel like a quantity of cats. And with the ants, I could see something where I disrupted I was like about to sort of like flush some of them down the sink. And I could see the other ones running and telling each other. And like, they looked so endearing, and because you could just see that they were like, oh my God, you have to hear about this. Like, don't go over there. And like, they just looked so like, I don't want to say human, because it's like, we obviously don't have like a monopoly on like communicating and not wanting to be flushed down a sink. But it was like, I felt so grateful for being able to like feel that way about them, and then not feeling the need to kill them. And then I found out what they liked, which was Listerine. The ants love like that, the mouthwash.
Really?
They don't like the bots. They weren't near the bottles, so I didn't get it, but like, because that's alcohol, but they like it when it dries up, the alcohol evaporates and there's like sorbitol in it. So it was like some little Listerine would spill on the side and they would like go into that. So then it became, then of course I could control and manipulate the ant population again. But then someone heard me talking about the ants and told the person who cooked the food, who told the person who did the administration. And she was like, I'm going to send people with like poison traps to catch the ants. And I was like, like, don't, like.
Yeah, we have ants as pets. We've had them for a long time, forever. But yeah,
there's some
I have
quantity
to
of ants
keep all
where,
the sweet things in the fridge now.
yeah, like there's some quantity of ants in the stuff that you want to eat, or like ants crawling on the toothbrush, that is like a problem. But
I did, yeah, thank you though. I had no idea why they were coming to the bathroom, and now I know. But yeah, all these stories with animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did think that Munjik was trying to teach us something by dying during the pandemic. And I didn't know what that was, but now that we're talking, she was so peaceful. We actually took her to the vet. She also had cancer. And Munjik, by the way, for the viewer, is our cat, whom Elif knows. And we took her to the vet, and she stayed there for more than a week, and she was losing weight, and she looked really miserable. And I was really mad at the vet for keeping her there. And because he eventually said that he had to operate on the cat to know what the problem is, but he didn't know whether the cat would survive the operation, because she'd lost so much weight. And I was like, why didn't you do it before?
Was it
or
lymphoma?
Whatever.
Was it lymphoma?
Who we have no idea. So I was like, okay, give me my cat back. So I took her, and then she really had been wanting to get out, and she had been hiding in places. So one day I saw this tail coming out from behind the shelves that was under a desk, because it was my daughter's pandemic Montessori school. Anyway, so she was really trying to hide, and then I realized she was trying to die. So I just let her out into the garden. And then Izan, my husband, felt really bad about that. So he just went out to find her, but there was all this like outgrown weeds in one part of the garden. And one day he just like, took off all the weeds. He spent hours trying to find Munjik, who was trying to die. And then he actually found her. She like buried herself under roots of a tree. Like there was this cave-like place. And I went there and I saw that she was really, really comfortable. Like she wasn't miserable like she was at the vet. She was really comfortable and she was really slow. Like her reactions were slow. She couldn't really react to me. She just like looked a little and then looked away. And maybe you remember in those days of the pandemic, everything was really quiet. There weren't any cars, there weren't any planes. So you could hear the bees, you could hear the birds, and like this animal was trying to die. And like she was really in peace. And I was like, okay, so we just let her out. I just leave her here. I don't try to take her to another doctor. And we made a decision and it was fine. And I thought, okay, she was trying to teach us something.
Oh, I'm happy that Munjuk had such a peaceful exit. It was, yeah, the vets are really hard.
It was too early. It was,
How
we
old
missed
was
her,
she?
but 9 years old.
That's
Which is
young.
not much, right? Yeah. Should we end with something more cheerful than
More
that?
cheerful?
What can be more cheerful? You're coming to Istanbul soon.
I hope so. Yeah, yeah. My mom's gonna be in Bodrum, so I'm gonna go to Bodrum, and before that, I want to stay in Istanbul for a little while. And you'll be back from, was it Göttingen?
Yeah, I'm going to I'm going to Göttingen. I was invited for the whole summer actually.
Oh wow!
Because Joseph Beuys did 100-day. He did some workshops in Kassel during Documenta 6, I think, and that lasted for 100 days. So
oh wow!
I was invited to Göttingen, which is near Kassel, for 100 days. And
So
there's
cool.
no way I can go to Göttingen for 100 days, but
for 100 days.
I'll go for over 100 days, for around 100 days, I'll have my attention on Göttingen. And I'll come up with a book eventually, hopefully, with
really, that's
title.
so cool.
Title, the art book guru has actually his studio and factory there. So the invitation came from him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll do an experimental book.
That's so cool. What's the book going? It's going to be about Göttingen? About what you think about
no,
there?
actually, styrofoam.
Oh, really?
It might be. It might be.
That's really
styrofoam.
Cool.
And
I mean, I'm sure there's styrofoam there too.
There might be. I have to find out. But styrofoam is cool because it's migrant material. Mm-hmm. And so it could just end up in Göttingen, just like anywhere else. So they're also very excited about Ebru, the art of marbling, which...
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful. I see some behind you.
Yeah, there's newspaper behind me. I put it on newspapers. And yeah, they're excited about that. So I might bring that in as well.
Oh, cool. That's gonna
I
be
might
awesome.
do a marbling performance, just like a true Turkish artist.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm planning some kind of trip where I'm going to England for book stuff, and then And then I'm going to Tbilisi in Georgia, which is where like the Russian dissidents are now. So like all the schools in England that send students to learn Russian literature or Russian language over the summer, they used to send them to Russia, but now they've cut their ties with Russian universities. So they're all going to Tbilisi now. So I was invited there to talk about Russian literature. But while I'm there, I'm going to try to like meet with a lot of people and write something about what's going on from there. And then with that in mind, I've been rereading a lot of like Russian literature that is, I was like, which ones are set in Tbilisi? So it's like Lermontov, Hero of Our Time, Tolstoy, Haji Murat. And then Pushkin has this journey to Erzurum, which like Erzurum. And that kind of starts out in Tbilisi. I was actually thinking of trying to do that and like going to, because it took Pushkin weeks, but it's just like Erzurum to Tbilisi is not that far. It's like 7-hour drive.
No, there's also buses that go between.
Yeah, there's buses. Yeah.
You could take the bus.
I could take the bus.
Yeah, there has been a flux of Russian immigrants in Istanbul.
Istanbul, right? Yeah.
I actually met an artist. I should connect you guys. I met an artist who was here when the war started.
Wow.
Because there's no visa between Russia and Turkey, and she was here to get a vaccination, to get a real vaccine, and then she was kind of stuck when the war started, and she realized that you couldn't use the word war in Russia. So she considered staying in Istanbul, but then left for Tbilisi, and now she lives with a group of people there, so you could meet them.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to talk to her.
Interesting. Cool. But yeah, so people travel just like styrofoam.
Yeah, I was just thinking I'm gonna look for styrofoam when I'm there.
Cool.
Is there a way? Is it like really? Birds where you can you look at the styrofoam and tell where it's from? Like
I can.
I guess no.
I can now. Not really.
Wow.
But I find that there's different characteristic of styrofoam depending on where they come from, where I've raised them. For instance, I actually have some pieces to show you. The works are called Shaped by Water. So this one, I actually sent all the sculptures to Mardin Biennial. I shipped bags full of styrofoam to Mardin because I'm setting up a installation there.
That's incredible.
Yeah, this is one that was shaped like a pebble. And then I have a few fragments remaining. The sculptures are gone. This is part of the sculpture.
Oh, wow.
And you can actually tell part of the story. If you look at it archaeologically, for instance, you can see these are marks that the birds make because they try to eat the styrofoam as they float. They think it's food, so they grab. And then from the different shades, the thicknesses and colors of the material, you can tell that, for instance, this was insulation material, and some of this material is, I think, I haven't figured out exactly what, but the brand name is Sista, so it's like also insulation, but it's like a foam that you put in and it expands. So part of these were used in boats, I suppose, so I find so much of it. And then the insulation material is usually floating from so between Yatsada and Sivrada, there's a big crack. And every now and then you have people, sometimes even municipalities, pour hafriyat, so like rubble, construction rubble, into that crack. And it goes to a depth that people can't really monitor and see, so that is too deep for divers. But the styrofoam raises and floats. It floats to our island, and there nature treats it just like any other pebble, and it forms. And there's a cave that is full of styrofoam because the waves just like push all the styrofoam deep into the cave, And then there's another part on another island, and there the styrofoam is exposed to the feces of seabirds. So it's like a more deserted place, and there the styrofoam starts, because of the acidity, it starts melting.
Yeah, it's correct,
So
right?
it's
Yeah.
a different formation. And then
Wow.
recently we discovered this beach on the Black Sea called Uzunya. And the styrofoam there is much cleaner, no bird feces. And because the Black Sea is less salty, it's actually like much cleaner and better. So we collect the styrofoam with the help of kids. We go there on hikes and collect the styrofoam and then turn these into artworks. But in a way,
Wow, that's incredible. Those look so cool. I can't wait to see the sculptures.
So yeah, in
They
a
look
way,
really
like,
beautiful.
they become really beautiful. Yeah, and people ask if I painted them, which I don't. Of course, I don't change them. I just like put them together with.
Is there, are you doing any kind of like, so the company that made that expanding, what, like, are you tracing to the companies and where they are and like how they make it and where it goes, or it's more you're just like looking at the,
I
what you
embrace them
find?
as migrants, but I can
Yeah.
the traces I can read. I try to voice.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm excited for our summer
Thank
projects and
you.
to compare
Yes,
notes.
we
Yay.
can grace styrofoam together.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can't wait. Yeah, so I'm hoping to be there at like the end of June, beginning of July.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I think I will be here.
Cool. And tell me when you'll be there and we'll figure it out. Okay. So do we just,
Well, this is a good closing. Thank you
I
for
think this is a good,
inviting me.
this is better than the cat. Because I was going to go into Friday's death and then it was going to be sad. Yeah, this was a good closing. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It was great to see you.
It was great to see you. It's so, your mind is so incredible. Like, it's so cool to hear, like that moment where you were like, so then of course I thought about compost. I was like, of course you did. I missed you.
I missed you too. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for this conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great evening.